Hello, this is Brian Triel, and behind me a picture of bears for no reason, but why not? And I wanted to talk today a little bit about the narrative dice system used in Genesys. So I'm doing a series of videos on Embers of the Imperium, which is a new tabletop role-playing game that has been brought out by Edge Studio, which is set in the universe of the board game Twilight Imperium 4. And I got the PDF of the book, and I kind of went briefly through the contents in a separate video, but some of the elements, like the dice and other systems, aren't explained in that book because it's all based around the Genesys core rulebook. So if it's something you're looking at getting into, I thought, well, I can kind of maybe explain some more of the details on how the system works. I'm not really an expert, but I've done enough playing with it. I think I got a general grasp, at least, to show you what's going on. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about the dice system because it's quite different than a lot of the other dice systems if you've played other games. So for example, if you've played D&D, you generally have a 20-sided die that you're rolling and adding modifiers to against a set difficulty. And so you basically have one axis of success or failure. And narrative dice are interesting. Actually, it's maybe my favorite dice system because instead of just the success failure axis, you also have advantage and threat axis, which I'll go into. So let me just, I've got some tabletop simulator here. I've got some dice set up. All right, so this is what the dice look like. So you have kind of two sets. So just here you have the yellow proficiency dice, the green ability dice, the blue boost dice, the red challenge dice, the purple difficulty dice, and the black setback dice. And these don't have numbers on them. There are charts you can get in the book that'll help you use numbered dice if that's all you have, but it's a little less, they look confusing now, but once you know how they work, it's actually less confusing, I think, to use these ones. I'll just kind of go over what they mean. So the ones on the left, so the yellow, the green, and the blue are more or less the good dice. And then the red, purple, and black are the bad dice. And so how these work is, let's start with the green ones, the ability dice. So these are kind of based on your characteristics, like your brawn, like your strength, your intelligence, your presence. Okay, so basically your stats determine how many of these ability dice you're going to use when you take up a challenge. Proficiency is kind of like your training, how good you are at a specific task. Are you a trained fighter? Are you a trained athlete? You know, so if you have training in a specific ability, then you will upgrade, not add. You're not adding yellow dice. What you do is you upgrade your green dice to yellow dice. And I'll go over that in a little more detail in a second. And then the boost, these blue dice are generally some kind of outside help that's helping you with the task. So it might be the use of a tool, or somebody's helping you, or some other favorable circumstance where you get an extra die. But instead of rolling against a fixed number like you do in D&D, you're rolling against a difficulty dice. So the difficulty here, the purple dice, basically would be the basic challenge of the task. The red dice, they're more they're upgrades of the purple dice, and they could just be the task is extra challenging or extra difficult, and there's higher risk outcomes on that one. And then the setback dice is kind of basic, again, external effects that are making it more difficult. So maybe you're trying to climb a cliff with the rope, but it's really windy, right? So you might add a black die, or you're in fight, but you can't see your opponent. So you have two black dice usually for darkness or something like that. So there's a lot of other things that can add or subtract these dice. So we'll go into that in a bit. But let's take a look at the symbols. Let's just zoom in a little here. So here we have on the good dice, you can see you have some sides that are blank, but the symbols we have is we have these star symbols, these kind of arrow symbols, and ignore that error message. Those can vary. So if you're playing Star Wars, for example, they use slightly different symbols that mean the same thing. I don't know why they just didn't use the same symbols. And then on these dice here, we have the X's are failure, and then these kind of circly things are threat. And so what happens is that the stars are success, And if I roll these dice, I'm going to cancel out each success with a star. So you can see here, if I'm just looking at these ones, I have a star on my yellow, I have a star on my blue. And so these two X's on the red die would cancel both of those out. And then these advantage are canceled out by threat. So I have two advantage, one here and one here. These get canceled here, which leaves me with a roll of one threat. So this axis, and I'll explain what that is now. So you have, again, the two axes. You have success and failure on one axis, and you have advantage and threat on another axis. Because you can succeed at a task, but still have some sort of threat evolve from that. Likewise, you could fail at a task, but something positive comes from it. And so a good example, well, maybe not a good example. So an example would be, let's say you're shooting at an enemy and you miss him, but you hit a pipe, but you roll a lot of advantage. And there's charts and tables that show you how to spend advantage. I'll show you an example one in a second, but let's say you roll a lot of advantage. So the GM might say, okay, so, or you could decide, okay, so I missed my target, but I hit a steam pipe behind the target, which is now filling that area up with steam. And so they have to leave cover, you know, something like that. So even though you missed your target, something good happened out of it. Or maybe you rolled enough advantage, you missed your target, but you rolled enough advantage, you could spend it to give you one of your other party members a blue die, like a bonus boost die. And it's like, okay, so I'm opening fire at him, but now he's so focused on me, you get a better shot from your side, type of thing. So in this case, I'd have one threat. It could be, I could spend this quite often if I'm running a game and I only have like one threat left over. I'll just say, okay, with stress. So let's say you're climbing this rope, it gets windy, and you know, you didn't fail, you came up as a wash, success, failure, so you're kind of stuck swinging on the rope, but you're nervous, like the wind's blowing you as you're hanging on this rope from a cliff, so you take a stress, so a strain. So you all in the Genesys system, you have 2 health bars, like your wounds, your injuries, and then just like strain, which is like physical and mental stress, which we'll get into in a different video. So let's do an example roll. I'll show you how it works. Oh, I should also just talk about triumph and despair. So just like with D&D, you do have like critical successes and critical failures. Basically, those only happen on the yellow and the red dice. And so a triumph counts as one success, plus it can trigger other things. And then the despair counts as a failure, plus it can trigger like, you know, like an even worse scenario. Okay, so let me just do an example. I'll show you how these dice would work. So let's say, so your stats in Genesys system is up 1 to 5 typically for player characters. So let's say you're playing a character that has to do, he has to climb a cliff and has a brawn of 3, right? Basically strength of 3. And so because of the strength of 3 for the task, we're going to take 3 dice. And now let's say you've trained in athletics. So you got 3 strength, which is a little above average. It's around average, high average. But let's say, you know what, I'm an athlete, I work out. I have 1 rank in athletics. So that rank would let me upgrade one of my green dice to a yellow die. Now, let's say that I have somebody climbed ahead of me. One of my party members climbed ahead and they set some, you know, they checked the ropes and they set some, what are they called, pythons or whatever in for me to help steady it a little bit. Okay, let's say I got a blue die because I got a little bit of help from my friend who climbed up before me. And let's say I set the standard difficulty as 2, but because of the wind, I'm going to add a black die. So this would basically be my pool of dice that I'll be rolling, right? So I can pick up all these dice. All right. So now I'm looking, oh, it's not good. All right. So let's say, now in this case here, I didn't roll any successes or failures. Or no, sorry, I did 2 failures. That's not good. Okay. So I got 1 threat and 2 failures. So in this point, I might fall or at least slide down the rope. So yeah, so I failed. So I didn't get a wash this time. I actually failed on my climb. So I would say here I got 1 threat and 2 failures. I was climbing this rope. It was swinging too hard. I was, kind of scared, lost my grip, and I fell to the bottom. So I might take a bit of fall damage there and some strain or something like that. Okay, so let's see if let's try another roll and see how that works. That wasn't a good one for the good guys. Oh, I keep rolling a lot of failures, so it's another fail. So you'll notice here I rolled 2 successes, 1 here and 1 here. They get canceled out by this failure. Now this time I failed, but I gained 2 advantage. So in this case, I might say, okay, you failed, but something good happened from your fall. So maybe you slipped on the rope a little, you've lost a little bit of ground, but you swung over a little bit and actually managed to grab find a handhold and maybe spotted a little bit of an easier way up the cliff that your friend before hadn't seen, or something like that. It's hard to think of stuff like this on the fly. So that's basically how it works. And then occasionally you're going to get these triumphs and despairs, which are going to either add a really good bonus or a terrible despair. A despair would maybe like you fell and landed. Not only did you fall, you landed on some sharp rocks at the bottom, something. So let me just take a look. Let's stop this share here. I'm going to I'll show you an example chart. So I mean, you can do all this sort of thing on the fly, of course, if you're creative enough. I would say in general, if players roll advantage, it's nice to let them spend their advantage, like how they want to spend it. But these charts can be nice to at least guide, like what's the scale I should be getting for how much advantage I rolled. And then the GM generally would choose the disadvantage or the threat that evolves. So the symbols on this are a little different because this is actually from a Star Wars PDF. So these little kind of winged halo things are the advantage in this one. That star with the circle, starburst with the circle is the triumph. And then over here on this side, the little dotted circles are the threat, and then the circled triangle things are the failures. So I don't know why they changed the symbols for this, because they're using the same system. But anyway, this is just some this chart is called successful attack effect. So this is very specific to combat and assuming you succeeded in hitting your target. But it does give you some ways you could spend your threat or advantage. So for example, this first line here, it's kind of a confusing one. So a lot of weapons will actually have critical ratings on them. So your weapon might have a thing that says if you get 3 advantage, you can spend it to stun your opponent or something like that. So some weapons will have features built in that you can spend your advantage on. And this one says specifically critical rating. So that's like your weapon does a critical injury to your opponent if you have enough advantage to spend, or if you roll a triumph, it's always an injury. Activate item quality, that's this one. So 2, a lot of them will have like, a burst, like let's say you throw a grenade and it's like, okay, for every 2 advantage you roll, you can hit an adjacent target with your grenade, something like that. So if you roll a single advantage, now they have the triumphs here on every one of them because you can always do anything lower with a triumph, but we'll just worry about the advantage. So this one here, recover 1 strain. So if you've taken some sort of stress during the combat, and that can be taken by having rolled threat previously or straining yourself to take extra maneuvers. This lets you recover some of that. So you've done something that was somewhat cathartic maybe, and the stress is going down. Maybe you're gaining more confidence in the combat or something like that. You can also spend 1 to let your next allied character add a blue die, a boost die to their roll. So somehow what you've done in the battle there, you can do this on a hit or a miss, but will aid your friend. You can also do the recover strain on a hit or miss, right? The second one here, you spend 2 advantage, but you could get a free maneuver. So maybe you've been shooting at your enemy and you forced them into cover. It's okay, now I have a little quick chance I can run over to another spot on the field here, for example. Or you can use it to add a black die to your target's check. So you're shooting at them and you're forcing them to keep their head down, so it's harder for them to shoot at you on their next turn, for example. And then this one here, so the blue die to any allied character's next check. So if you're spending 1 threat, you're giving the next allied character a booster die, but if you spend 2, you can give it to any ally, so that regardless of turn order, which is one I'll talk about when I do combat, because turn order is different in here as well than it is in something like D&D. So it just goes through all these 3 examples. So maybe have them drop their weapon, get rid of any defensive bonuses they have, anything like that. So, but on the negative side, okay, let's say you're rolling threat and you're in combat here. So, and again, some of these doesn't matter if the attack's successful or not. You can suffer strain, hit or miss. So maybe you've been firing, your gun's overheating and you burn your hand, you know, or let's say you're an archer and you thwack the inside of your arm with your bow, something like that. So you're just taking some strain that's not like severe damage, but if you take too much, it will incapacitate you. Oh, so you get one maybe here, lose benefit of prior maneuver. So maybe you did something that gave you advantage in the combat. Like maybe you went to duck behind a barrel, but then you knock it over and it rolls away. So, you know, you lose the benefit of of the maneuver you previously took. And etc. You could fall prone on 3 threat. Now, if you get too many, oh, these are despair markers. That's my fault. So these ones here are despair markers, not failures. Despair is bad. Again, like the triumph, you can always do anything worse with despair, but you could damage your weapon or tools. You could run out of ammo. The enemy could get an upgrade to their dice, right? So these are just some examples you could spend your stuff on. So anyways, let's try another couple examples. I actually brought up we were playing online during COVID. And if you want to watch any of the games just to see how some of these checks are done, I will link to our playlist in the description here. Okay. So you have here the different types of dice. Okay. So let's do another example. So let's say I'm running a game and let's just do a sample combat roll. So I have a player and they have let's say they're really dexterous. So they have a dexterity of 4. And they're trained in ranged light weapons and they're using a light blaster. So we're going to say, let's say they have 1 rank in it. Now, let's say they have 2 ranks in it. Bam, bam. So they have 4 total of these dice because of their 4 dexterity, and 2 of them are upgraded because of their training or proficiency in ranged light weapons. And then let's say though that they've come up to an empty warehouse. They're looking for some ancient plans inside of an old warehouse on a destitute like old planet. And what they didn't know is inside somebody's been waiting for them. So they're crash open the door and somebody starts firing at them, but they can't see inside because it's dark. So complete darkness. They can't really see their enemy. We're going to give them 2 black dice, and their enemy was waiting for them and hiding behind cover. Let's give them another 2. So it's very tough. They have to get in through the door to really even things out. So they're pretty good at shooting, but they're getting a lot of black dice because of the bad circumstances. And also there's the general difficulty. So they're not too far away. So if close range combat is 1 die. So it's not far that they're shooting. So that's not a big issue, but they're shooting into the dark, into heavy cover. And so they have, so let's have them roll this and see how they come up. Now, the nice thing with this is it calculates for you. So this is actually a success. We're doing a lot better with these electronic dice than we were with the ones in tabletop. So this one came out with 2 successes. So damage to this, you would then take the base damage of the weapon and add the number of successes. So let's say the base damage of the light blaster was 6. This would say 8 damage minus the character soak, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so you hit them, but there was no threat or advantage. So then let's clear that. And let's say they're fine. Well, let's say you get in there, you get some light. Actually, let's have them shoot back at you. All right. So let's say they're not as dexterous as you. They're not as trained as you. We're going to give them the upper hand here. We're going to give them a blue die because they're firing. You're being bottlenecked through a doorway as you're trying to get into the warehouse, and they can see you clearly. They're also going to use a maneuver to aim because they were, they're sitting there waiting for you, ready to fire. Again, your close range. Okay, so they're probably going to hit you too. Oh yeah, so they got a pretty solid hit on you, and they actually got 2 advantage. So maybe they're able to move into the dark warehouse. So they've got their dark vision goggles on. They're able to move into another position, so you're not really sure where they are anymore. So they're managed to stay into cover. So, anyways, there's just kind of an example of how you can run this. So, yeah. That's all I got for you today. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, or if there's anything I missed. I don't want to go into too much detail, like talking about things like the injury table, yada. I'll cover when I actually talk about combat and stuff like that. So have a great day.